Everyone. Looks like we've got quorum, so we'll go ahead and get started this morning. Thank you very much for joining our webinar today. We're going to talk about the FiCS Financial Innovation Lab, particularly about this incubation workstream that we're kicking off this year, and kind of how cycle one will work and how you can put forward a proposal. So we're very excited to have so many people on the call. We're looking forward to getting lots of proposals and having a lot opportunity to work with more of you in the coming year. I'm going to kick it off over to our Executive Director of CPI, Barbara Buchner, for some opening remarks, and then over to Anderson Caputo, and then we'll begin kind of an in-depth conversation on what the FiCS Incubation Lab is and how you can be involved. Thanks, everyone.
Great. Well, thank you so much, Nicole, and thank you so much all for joining us today. It's a pleasure seeing so much interest in the FiCS Lab, which is very close to our hearts. It's fantastic, Anderson, to have you here as well. I think I'm going to keep it very short. This is really about this incubation pillar of the FiCS Lab, but I do want to just stress how important it is to make sure that we really bolster domestic markets and really unlock more domestic resources for climate action, for sustainable development more broadly. We have been working at CPI to track how much money is going into climate action. And while we see general kind of increases in climate finance, we also know that we've fallen far short where we need to be. And we are just at the brink of getting into Baku next week at COP. And I think what we have been feeling very strongly about, also based on the data that we have been tracking, is that development banks have a key role in really unlocking more action. They understand the market, they have the knowledge to really work both with domestic public and private actors, and they really can help scale investments into climate and sustainable development to the levels needed. So I'm very excited that at CPI we've been working and partnering with the Financing Common Secretariat, with IDB, of course, as well, to really think about how can we help public development banks do more and really kind of scale their actions and replicate what works, but also think about how you can innovate together to really kind of address some of the needs and risks that we see in the market. So I think with that, I'm just going to hand over to Anderson directly, and then let us get started with our deep dive into the incubation pillar of the lab. So wonderful to be here.
Thanks so much, Barbara. I'll also be super short, like just to share also like some words supporting the innovation, like supporting, like showing our commitment and telling everyone of the opportunity that is here now. And then, so it's critical to maximize the power of public development banks. We know that this is critical to achieve the sustainable development goals. Part of doing that is to strengthen this collaboration that we're seeing, the coordination between multilateral development banks, public development banks, donors, philanthropies, all actors in the development finance community to foster these new financial solutions that can increase the scale. That's what we are looking for. And that's why initiatives like the Financial Innovation Lab take so much importance, this initiative in articulation with other FiCS actions, because there are several things taking place. Now, this complements. We think that this allows the public development banks to join forces to find financial solutions through innovation, experimentation, addressing common challenges together will facilitate finding these new solutions faster. That's what we need. We need speed, and sharing these solutions globally and replicate. In terms of IDB, we really believe that this new lab is already it will play and is already playing a critical role in the discussions of the new financial systems. The lab could be an instrumental tool in helping to identify and develop new financial solutions that can address the most pressing development challenges. And then in this regard, we are firmly committed to support the lab. That's why we are here today, and we believe this platform has the potential to introduce new financial solutions. In the framework of the lab, the IDB is already very happy to be co-chair of the Debt for Nature Swaps Working Group, because there we are leveraging the experiences we had in bringing this type of operations in Bahamas, in Barbados, in Ecuador. We are happy to share this experience with the other multilateral development banks, the national development banks participating in the FiCS Financial Innovation Lab. We also supported the idea to develop this platform. in the last edition when we had in Cartagena, and we are very hopeful, no, that already by the next FiCS meeting that we'll have in Cape Town next February, there will be results to be shown. And finally, just to close, as I mentioned, we really believe this is an opportunity for the public development banks to submit the proposals. And then I wanted also to bring here the open invitation to other FiCS stakeholders to join the lab, not only here, but all the works, the work streams that the lab is providing. So a reminder that the lab is an open initiative, allows any interested public development bank to join. Active participation will allow us to enrich even more the experiences. We are facing here a great opportunity for public development banks through the launch of this initial cycle of the Lab Incubator that we're going to be learning more in a second. That's why we want to encourage public development banks that have an innovative idea to accelerating climate finance through mechanisms that demonstrate innovation, actionability, catalytic potential. So please submit your proposals to access technical assistance that will help develop and implement this initiative. With that, thank you very much for the opportunity. It's always a joy, Barbara, Nicole, to be participating in this and supporting the initiative. So in the following session, Nicole will be providing further details. No? Thank you very much from the part of the IDB.
Thank you, and thank you to IDB for your continued support in this. We really value this partnership and appreciate everything that IDB has done in terms of the working groups and the incubation lab. So just before we get started, I do want to stress that this is in part a Q&A session. So we're going to put some links in the chat for you right now that kind of provide some information on the application and the guidelines. If you haven't seen them already, they're also available on the Finance in Common website. And as we go through the presentation, please feel free to put comments in the chat, any questions to us as we go along. We'll be collating those and addressing those at the end of the presentation in our Q&A session. So, we'll kind of look through those and make sure that we're addressing any of the pressing issues. And we can also be reached at our particular email address, which I'll put on the screen at the end of the presentation as well. So we're quite responsive and we want to be here for you as much as possible throughout this proposal process. So with that, I want to provide a little bit of information about the FiCS Lab in general. Now, as Anderson mentioned, this really did come from this FiCS 2023 communique in Cartagena, looking for opportunities to really support public development banks in this idea of incubation and broadening and supporting them in terms of new climate finance ideas that we're looking for. So it is run in collaboration between Finance in Common, IDB, and CPI, with CPI serving as the secretariat. And our financial support is currently provided by the Children's Investment Fund Foundation, so coming from philanthropic third-party sources. Now, when we started this, we really had the aim of building a platform to foster innovation and collaboration among public development banks, being a space where they can talk about mobilizing private capital and expanding climate finance, particularly focusing on how to create climate impacts in emerging markets and developing economies. And a lot of the work that we have done so far on the FiCS Lab is in support of this. So I'll be running through just a little bit of what the FiCS Lab is for anyone who's not familiar, and then we'll dive directly into that incubation pillar and how the proposals will work. So with that, we really kind of came away from the Cartagena Summit and conversations with IDB and Finance in Common with a mission to understand better what the needs are when it comes to climate finance in emerging markets and developing economies and how to better support public development banks in this space. And we interviewed about 50 public development banks, national development banks, MDBs, and other experts in this area. And we really identified three major challenges that we were finding across public development banks, and really kind of a mission for the FiCS Lab to address these when it comes to the effectiveness of climate finance going forward. The first is that public development banks have a tendency to work in silos, particularly for smaller public development banks, where perhaps sustainability isn't being mainstreamed throughout the bank's operations. And it's not being necessarily disseminated throughout all of the work streams. There's also a real lack of standardization. So a lot of times when it comes to these instruments, there's no initial starting point or off-the-shelf solution. Everything is created bespoke, which requires a lot of capacity and a lot of time. So where can we kind of help support this idea of standardization across public development banks that meets multiple needs across the system? And the third is really a lack of capacity. Particularly when we talk to public development banks in emerging markets and developing economies, we heard that they were really facing a challenge where their teams were quite small and they were already at full capacity, just dealing with business as usual approaches. And as much interest as they had in mobilizing climate finance and thinking about new innovative solutions for climate finance, it really kind of got stuck that they didn't have the capacity to build out those instruments and think about that more effectively. So we really wanted to take the opportunity to use the FiCS Lab to address some of these questions. So ultimately, at its core, as you know, going back to that platform statement, the FiCS Lab is really tailored to address public development bank needs. We want to address the unique challenges that they face, the unique contexts and operating models that best serve the emerging markets and developing economies that they work in. And we've kind of created 3 pillars to address these 3 needs that we have. The first is pillar 1. We have a series of knowledge sharing and best practice dissemination webinars and conversations with our working group members with these to support a couple different topics that I'll get to in a moment. And really the idea is to kind of learn from each other about how we're able to mainstream climate throughout our considerations, how we're able to overcome silos and overcome some of the challenges and barriers to some of these new ideas that are out there on climate finance. Pillar 2 is really designed to assist the standardization aspect. So CPI is working with our public development banks, working group members to really kind of think about where can we start to build out this standardization? Where can we start to hold the pen on a series of guidelines or sort of contracts that can probably make things a little bit easier to implement some of these new ideas or approaches? And then pillar 3, which is probably, why we're here. It's the incubation pillar. It's probably the most exciting and has the most real world context. And that's really looking for opportunities for CPI to support a public development bank in overcoming those capacity constraints and providing that sort of targeted financial and technical support to really help us push forward some of these ideas and really help them become reality in the long term. So with that, I've mentioned we have some working groups. Pillars 1 and 2 really are supported by our working group members, which are a series of public development banks. As Anderson said, these are open to all public development banks. We're super interested in getting more people involved, making sure our public development bank or our working group topics for cycle 2 really speak to the needs that you're seeing in public development banks. So for cycle 1, we have 4 main topics. The first is climate resilient debt clauses. The second is debt for nature or debt for climate swaps. The third is currency risks, and the fourth is domestic carbon markets. And these were identified as some of the key challenges for cycle 1. We're going to go back and talk to FiCS members and make sure that our cycle 2 working group members really our working group topics really speak to the needs of our members and public development banks more whole. So for those of you that will be at the Financing Commons Summit, do expect to see a survey going around just to kind of give your thoughts on areas that would be of interest to you for the 2025 year and kind of the cycle 2 aspect to it. But that really kind of brings us to the incubation pillar. So pillar 3 is really designed to support climate finance instrument develop. And we are going to be providing financial and technical support. I'll get into the details of that in a moment. And the financial support will be between $250,000 to $500,000. And that's all in USD. And it is going to be dependent on budget and needs, but those are our floor and our ceiling for the financial support for cycle 1. And right now we are accepting a competitive proposals through the end of the year. So we opened up on October 17th, and we really kind of want to facilitate and make sure we get a lot of really good ideas for cycle 1. And we'll be accepting up to 3 proposals to bring forward in 2025 and to partner with CPI and a development partner to really bring those to fruition. And the end goal of this is really to make sure that at the end of the day, the Public Development Bank has an instrument that's well built out and is ready to pilot and is looking for opportunities to pilot. So when it comes to the timeline of this, we've opened this call for proposals. The application period will end on December 31st at the end of this year. Oh, apologies, that should say 2024. And then our goal is really that at the Financing Commons Summit, we'll have gone through these proposals, we'll have selected our applicants, have interviews, have contracts ready, and we'll be able to present those applicants, the selected proposals at the Financing Commons Summit in South Africa in Cape Town on February 26th through 28th. We're very excited about this and really hoping to have a nice celebration and really highlight some of the innovation and new ideas that are coming out of this and new ways to work together. Then CPI and the development partner will kind of work over this 7-month period, we call it the development period, to really kind of flush out what this instrument looks like. Do you need market studies? Do you need feasibility studies? And we'll go a little bit more in detail into what this looks like ongoing. And then for the final year, we'll provide light touch support. With the idea being that after October 2025, we are, oh, I'm sorry, are people not able to see my presentation?
I can go good,
I can
Nicole.
see it.
I can see it, yes.
Apologies, I just had a comment saying someone couldn't see it, so
too.
wanted to pause there. My apologies. So like I said, we'll end the development period in October 2025. And the idea is really that the Public Development Bank has something that is ready to go and ready to pilot. And then CPI will provide light touch support for a year following that, with the idea being that we're really able to help support and build out and find an opportunity and a pathway to that pilot implementation. And we really kind of expect the piloting to happen about 6 to 12 months after the development period ends, although it's more than welcome to happen sooner than that as well. But we just want to make sure that we're providing that long-term support to make sure that this really has value add for the public development banks. So with that, kind of getting into what we're looking for with this incubator, what we're thinking about when it means innovation for public development banks, how to go through with putting together a proposal, how it's going to be evaluated and the criteria, kind of what that looks like. So this is where we're more than happy to take any questions at the end of the conversation if you have them around this particular area. We have 5 main criteria for, apologies. We have 5 main criteria for cycle 1 that we are really looking for when it comes to public development bank applications. So the first is that we are looking for innovation. Now, when I say innovation, we don't necessarily mean this brand new, exciting idea that's never been done before. That's not really what public development banks are built for. So what we really think about when we think about innovation for public development banks is what's a new approach to your bank? What's outside your business as usual operations? What addresses a market challenge in a way that's better than anything out there currently? So really trying to think about, innovation as something that's within the public development bank mandate and sort of scope of activities as well. We also want to look for partnership. So for cycle 1, we really are going to be looking for applications that have a combination of a public development bank and an independent development partner. Essentially for cycle 1, and I'll get more into detail in this later, CPI will be procuring those development partner and that external resources on behalf of the public development bank. And that's where that financial support will come in. We're also looking for proposals that have kind of a nice lab fit. We want to make sure that all 3 parties involved in the contract really have a sort of a benefit to it. We want to make sure that what we're offering really does add value to your bank's operations. We also want to focus on actionability. I mean, again, we really want this to be piloted and have an opportunity to pilot after that development period. So we're looking for projects that really do have an appropriate runway for that pilot and aren't facing a regulatory environment that kind of puts barriers on this instrument's implementation. And then lastly, our main criteria over there is the catalytic potential. Part of the FiCS Lab is really about thinking, how can what works for one public development bank be shared with another public development bank? Understanding that contexts are different, how can we think about replicability across different banks with different needs? So thinking a little bit about, beyond just this incubation pillar, what are the long-term impacts of this across the system? So diving a little bit more deeply into some of these topics, just to make sure that we're perfectly clear about kind of what we're looking for. In general, the way we think about innovation and the financial instruments that are eligible for support, we really do need it to be a financial instrument. And we're not looking for like a project-specific financial instrument. We want something that has a little longevity to it and has opportunities to kind of live beyond a single project financing. Now, CPI has run the Global Innovation Lab for Climate Finance for 10 years, and kind of the list of items here and instruments here are all instruments that we have experience in, and we've successfully really, helped incubate and bring to fruition. So we have bonds and debt instruments, structured funds, equity vehicles, insurance instruments, results-based or conditional payment structures, hedges or swaps, particularly around currency risk, taxonomies, key performance indicators or KPIs based on some of the metrics that are going on in terms of real economy impact, guarantees, and really kind of other relevant financial tools. We're trying to be quite broad as what we look at as innovative and financial instrument related for this first cycle in particular. And again, we do need to stress that no instruments that face regulatory barriers within your market. That's something that's a much bigger challenge. And I think we really want to make sure that we do have that actionability aspect for year 1. We also have, an example of an eligible instrument, and this is actually linked in those guidance documents as well, so you can get a little bit more details in terms of what we're looking for and some of the details around this instrument. But our favorite example here is an energy savings insurance that was led by IDB with the support of BASE, and this project actually went through our Global Innovation Lab several years ago. And the idea really is that small and medium enterprises need to make energy efficiency upgrades, both for mitigation and for cost saving purposes. But sometimes the returns on those investments and the savings aren't realized in a sort of quick and efficient manner. So it's not as much a priority for those small and medium enterprises. Perhaps they're willing to put it off, or they're a little bit more concerned about getting their savings in the long run. So IDB created a insurance, really kind of with the goal of making sure that the technical solutions providers were able to purchase the insurance, and then the small and medium enterprises could then come and get their upgrades, knowing that either they had a sort of a backup in case the value savings weren't realized. They had this insurance to prove that there was commitment towards this, and that if their savings didn't come through, they had recourse there. So really kind of an innovative aspect, really kind of focused on those small and medium enterprises, supporting mitigation and supporting adaptation. And we've actually seen this replicated all across Latin America, Southeast Asia, and Europe. So it's been extremely popular, and it's been taken up by a number of other banks as well. So with that, and we've got a couple ideas and then the questions on the partnership in the chat as well. But just to kind of highlight this in particular, we are looking for a partnership for cycle one. So development partners can be civil society organizations like NGOs or think tanks. They can be consultants, academics, commercial banks, private funds, other similar entities, even legal organizations, because we really want to make sure that what we're procuring on behalf of the Public Development Bank has that value add. Now, we are kind of requesting that the main applicant are both a public development bank. That is a requirement. And that's to make sure that the Public Development Bank has a course to really pilot in that long term. And so we are thinking that the Public Development Bank will need to be the applicant. We are hoping that it is from an emerging market or a developing economy, or that the instrument provided has an impact on the emerging markets or developing economies in their region. So we're really trying to get to that impact aspect with the Public Development Bank focus. We're also looking for that development partner. And like I said, this can be CSOs, consultants. We're trying to be quite broad, but they do need to be 100%. We'd love it if they're either local to the Public Development Bank and have sort of an on-the-ground regional presence, or are really experts in climate finance and can bring that expertise and that experience to the instrument development. And lastly is the partnership stage. So we're not requiring an MOU or anything at that point in time. We'd love it if there were conversations between the Public Development Bank and the development partner prior to the application going through and the proposal, but we don't need a formalized relationship at this point in time. And we'll get into a little bit about why that is and how CPI will hold the contract in a moment. So when it comes to a little bit about this cooperation between the different, oh, I'm so sorry. I apparently was not moving the right slides. So this is the energy savings insurance led by IDB. And then we've got kind of some information about the eligible entities. So this is a little bit about the public development partners and the financial support, kind of thinking about how we build out this relationship and we support all the different sort of public development banks and the development partners within this. So for cycle one, financial support does have to go directly to the development partner. As I said, CPI is essentially procuring those resources on behalf of the Public Development Bank. For cycle two, we're looking for opportunities to bring financing directly to the Public Development Bank as well, either through matching funding from another sort of multilateral, bilateral development agency, or being able to sort of change the way CPI does our regranting and sending that information directly to, or sending that financing directly to a Public Development Bank. But for cycle one, this is where we're at, and we do need to send that finance directly to that development partner instead. So CPI will sort of administer and maintain that three-party contract. That way, the contract is directly between the development partner and CPI, rather than the Public Development Bank and the development partner. CPI will also provide a dedicated team of expertise and analysts to kind of really support building out what this instrument looks like. Like I said, we really have a lot of experience from our Global Innovation Lab, and there's a lot that we can add from our own experience in terms of different activities and sort of support that and technical experience. We also are going to be providing the development partner with that funding through a fixed obligation grant and based on a series of milestones. So our due diligence requirements will be a little bit less, but funding will come out in tranches based on milestones and deliverables. And the development partner is really decided to be sort of providing external expertise and capacity. So obviously public development banks, they have a lot of this knowledge internally and they have a lot of abilities. And so we want to make sure that the development partner is adding a little bit to what they already have that really helps this instrument get developed and get over the finish line, whether that's that legal aspect or, having a little bit more of a CSO focus and making sure that it's getting socialized within the potential markets correctly. So really thinking about where the development partner can also add value to the public development bank in terms of that expertise and capacity building. When it comes to that lab fit, so as I said, CPI does have a lot of assistance that we can provide and sort of bringing our own expertise to the table. And so these are a series of activities that CPI has undertaken under our Global Innovation Lab with great success. We can sort of do design and testing of financial instrument mechanics, market research and analysis, financial modeling, even things like taxonomy development and environmental and social impact modeling. So really thinking about, if your particular instrument really needs one of these activities, kind of where can CPI add that value as well? And then lastly, on lab fit, when it comes to sort of the ideas that we're willing to accept for the first cycle 1 proposals, we really are trying to have kind of a broad net. We're open to anything that's an idea that has an early concept stage, perhaps some preliminary research been worked on, all the way to something where you've got either a pre-pilot or you're even in initial development and you need a lot of external support to kind of cross your T's and dot your I's and make sure that everything is ready for that pilot. Perhaps answering some final questions on concept details and markets. So really trying to be as broad as possible in terms of the ideas that we're looking to accept for cycle 1. Now, as I mentioned, we do have 4 main thematic areas for 2024. And those are going to be climate resilient debt clauses, debt for nature, debt for climate swaps, currency risk management, and domestic carbon markets. Now, we do not require that your idea be focused on one of these 4. It is part of the criteria and it will be weighted in there, but it's not a firm requirement. So if you have an idea that is outside these 4 different topics, we are absolutely accepting proposals on that for this year. We also will be doing this again in 2025 with cycle 2, and those will have new topics, or at least some new topics for the working groups. So at least some new topics coming to the forefront as well, if you're interested. So with that, I'm more than happy to take kind of questions and answers. We've got some questions in the chat that I believe people are pulling together. So I'll be going through those. And then before that, we're actually going to have some comments from Adama Mariko from Finance in Common just to talk about their proposal or their thoughts on the FiCS Lab as well. So Adama, I hand it over to you.
Thank you very much, Nicole. Thanks everyone. Actually, I'm very far away in the eastern part of the globe, but very glad to see you all around this discussion. Very pleased also to see the attendance. Hope this gives you clarity on what is the Finance in Common Innovation Lab. Actually, we very much want to leverage the existing knowledge and initiatives, and give it a possibility to scale. For the institutions to not waste time on identifying which innovation exists already, but also to take into account the national perspective from the national development institutions in order to also bring more local solutions from the public development banking ecosystem. So this is an initiative where at the ramping and benefiting from the experience and expertise of CPI managing global lab. So typically, I think that this is a role the public development banks should play by at least sharing the knowledge they have among the community of PDBs, but also definitely to use this capacity we have in our balance sheet and the innovation capacity we have regarding financial structures in order also to push it in the international discussion and the international fora. Joining MDBs, national development institutions, regional institutions, in order to have one voice and demonstrating that public development banks can use innovation, financial innovation, to also speed up the response on the development agenda. So those are the discussions we are having with the G20, with the UN, regarding the international financial architecture and how public development banks can really be critical at each level on this response. So this also gives me the opportunity to tell you about the next Finance in Common Summit, which we definitely put under the umbrella of the Summit of Solutions, really to focus on how public development banks can really be instrumental in order to showcase the innovation they are doing, showcase the projects they are implementing, and how those are really solving market failures, solving problematics, bringing solution for financial all type of investments, I may say, in the SDGs, but mainly also on social issues and climate issues, etc. So the summit will take place for the second time in Africa. The first time was in 2022. This time it will be in Cape Town, South Africa, from the 26th to the 28th of February 2005, 26th to 28th February 2025. So why it is important to join this is beyond the showcasing of the financial solutions and the innovation lab. It is also the place where we will have access to the G20, as South Africa is hosting the G20 this year, and 2025. And the fact that there will be the meeting of the G20 finance ministers and the central bank governors at the same time than the FiCS. I may say same time, same place in Cape Town. So this is an opportunity, to beyond discussing what should be the financial reforms, to also engage directly with the finance ministers of the G20 and the central bankers. So what are the solutions that we can bring for more local currency financing for the public development banks, but also for the countries that are benefiting from the public development banks funding? What are the solutions, and how can we scale the use of debt for nature swap, those contingency clauses that the G20 have validated and encouraged, and how the public development banks are using those clauses and are spreading it out for the benefit of the and for the sake of their clients, which are the countries also. So those are the type of discussions we definitely will have with the finance ministers and the central bank governors at the next door. In a way also to engage them, what should be the reforms that allow us to be more innovative and more accurate while structuring fundings and not being in a place where the regulatory framework is preventing us from using our balance sheet in the best way, while we also look at the gap of financing and how we should speed up our processes. So that's why I really commend all of you to also register for the next Financing Commons Summit. The registration platform is opened. Please, join those discussions, and I think it will be really useful or helpful to have your deliverables and demonstrations coming from the FiCS Lab and whatever innovation we should implement by that date. Finally, 2025 is also critical in the international development space, because it will be 10 years after the Paris Agreement, 10 years after the Addis Ababa Action Plan, and 10 years also after the SDGs. So as I'm saying that the UN will have the Financing for Development Summit in Sevilla, Spain in 2025. So it will be also the year for reforms. And I think as this coalition, this movement, Financing Common, with our stakeholders, being the private sector, the CSOs, the academics, we should also, push, more reforms in the international agenda, more reforms that can, give, space and scale to the innovation lab and the impact we seek in doing that. Those are just few words I wanted to share and convey, all of you our invitation for the next Financing Commons Summit. Please note the dates. Go register. We'll drop the line, the website address in the chat. for all of you also to see the details regarding logistics, etc., from the 26th to 28th of February 2025. Nicole, that was my take. Thank you very much for all the input you have brought. This was really, I mean, even me, I know the FiCS Lab, but I keep learning and seeing interest on what we are building. Thanks to CPI and thanks to all of our colleagues, IDB, and all the colleagues that are joined the discussion today. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Delma, and thank you to everyone on the FiCS team for all of your continued support on this effort. So this is really kind of a new area, particularly for public development banks. So we do appreciate everyone for being on the call and your enthusiasm. We do have some questions in the chat, so I'm going to kind of go through those as well, a little bit in the order that they've come in, but please feel free to continue to put those questions in there and we'll add them to the list. So the first question really is looking at the Global Innovation Lab that CPI has run for many years and the FiCS Lab, kind of what the difference is between those two. And so the first is really that, we will be drawing on a lot of the experience from the Global Innovation Lab. It's been very successful and we're very proud of that work. So we want to kind of take all the lessons learned that we've found there and really tailor them for what the public development banks need. As I mentioned before, it's kind of thinking about how public innovation for public development banks is different than innovation for the public or the private sector necessarily. So really trying to make sure that we're meeting a lot of the public development banks, especially those smaller public development banks in emerging markets and developing economies, where they're at. And we also really kind of want to think about, public development bank involvement is necessary in this instrument, but the sources of funding for that financial instrument under the FiCS Lab can really be public or private. And the idea is that we want to focus on capital mobilization if that's an opportunity, or if it otherwise fits with the public development bank mandate and priorities for that year. And the last point is kind of going back to Adama's topic or comments. We've really focused on those 4 topics for the year. We've had some great discussions in our working groups. We've had some great presentations. And so we really want to support the ideas that have come out of those working groups going forward and make sure that we can make them as actionable as possible. So that's kind of where we're thinking about the main differences coming in. But we do acknowledge that there's definitely some complements between the two. And so we do see this being a little bit supportive. We also know that for CPI, the long-term goal of this is to make sure that we are able cycle 2 and beyond to provide that financial support a little bit more broadly. So I also saw a comment in the chat about whether or not an organization can submit proposals for more than one area, as well as a little bit more on eligibility. So just to dive into that more broadly, an organization can submit proposals for more than one area. I would say, though, that each proposal, each sort of distribution of financial support can only go to support one instrument. We don't necessarily want this being split up to support 3 different instruments if they're not clearly related to each other. The idea being is that, if you need a development partner, if you need bank time and attention, if you need CPI time and attention, we'd really rather be able to focus that on one particular project and make sure it gets all the attention and support it needs. When it comes to the applicants, we do support CSOs and those nonprofits as development partners, but we do really need the public development bank to hold the pen on the application. This can be done with support from the development partner based on concept notes and conversations, but really one of the ways that we ensure that the public development bank is fully supportive of the initiative and of the proposal is by having them hold the pen on the actual application itself. So thank you for that. For a couple of the other questions, we've had a question about Spanish. So we are actually working to translate some of our materials into Spanish, and we are accepting applications in Spanish, and as well as French and Italian. However, I will say that the CPI team, although we are multilingual, we are not necessarily multilingual in the groups that are needed to provide that concentrated support. So if you do come to CPI and your proposal is selected, you will be getting that CPI support in English. So having at least one English speaker on your team is going to be critical for that as well. So we do have a question about whether the grant can be used to compound the product itself as part of a subordinate share. Oh, that's a great question. And I would say, yes, we're certainly open to that, particularly if the development partner is someone who would need to invest within the product itself. So really kind of providing that seed funding for it as well. So very much open to that. I think that that's probably a little bit one of those things we'll want to make sure that there's a strong benefit for the public development bank that's involved as well, making sure that at the end of the day, they really do benefit from their involvement in this in lieu of that financial support. So I think that that's definitely open to that, and that counts as eligible for this requirement, and it will need to kind of be decided a little bit on a case-by-case basis, measuring that impact and that public development bank support. Let's see. I think we've answered a couple of these questions in the chat directly. Any further questions? I'll just give people a moment to add them through. And just as an FYI, any comments from Tarika or Zainab or Rob in the chat are from our team. We've got a number of CPI folks on the call helping to provide links and answer questions today. Is there a limit to the number of accepted proposals by topic or area? Also a good question. I think that we are, for cycle one, trying to be very open and broad. We really want to, for cycle one, focus on that actionability aspect of it, making sure that we have proposals and ideas that have a great buy-in from the Public Development Bank and do have a pathway to piloting. I think that, so for cycle one, we're not interested in providing firm limits. I think for cycle two and beyond, we'll really look to kind of have both a geographic and a topical spread across the different ideas. But for cycle one, we're trying to be a little bit more open and focusing a little bit more heavily on that actionability criteria. We'll just give folks another minute to put any questions they have in the chat. Oh, there's a comment from Bendez about a particular, used for a seminar to design the details of the product. That's a great question. I will have to look into that. I'm not familiar with it off the top of my head, but that's certainly something that we can look into and follow up with you directly. We also are offering, just throughout this whole incubation and proposal process, an opportunity to chat with the CPI folks one-on-one to talk a little bit about your particular proposal. If you have something a little bit more confidential that you want to share and make sure it's eligible, we're offering what we call office hours, which is where you can email us at the Finance in Common FiCS Lab and really sort of get one-on-one support. We'll sort of sit down with you, we'll have a conversation about eligibility, have a conversation about the proposal development, what you may need, what you may not need, in addition to sort of an FAQ document that we will make sure is up on the FiCS website ASAP as well. So really trying to make sure that we're answering questions preemptively, but also that we're here as a resource if you have any further questions going forward. With that, I will. Doesn't seem like we have any more questions. If we do, please feel free to toss them in the chat, and I'll be here for another couple minutes. Otherwise, you can reach out to us at the FiCS Lab at cpiglobal.org, and we'll always be available. We're pretty responsive in that area, so just making sure that we can answer your questions directly. This slideshow can be sent to the participants if you'd like. More than happy to do that. And our recording will actually be available on the FiCS website as well, starting next week. So trying to make sure that you have all the resources necessary. Applications, one further point. Applications will need to be submitted through the Submittable platform. We've used this before, it's worked quite well. We do have a PDF of the application, so you can see all the questions ahead of time. You kind of know what you're getting into, but we will be using Submittable for all applications. If you email us with your application, we will ask you to go back and put it in that Submittable platform as well. So just an FYI there. Thank you all very much for your time. I truly appreciate it, and we look forward to getting a lot of exciting proposals and to working with you all closer next year. If you'd like to join any of our working groups at any point in time, please feel free just to reach out and we'll add you to those lists. We meet monthly for about an hour virtually, so trying to make that as easy as possible for folks to attend. Thank you all very much and have a great day.